If the people who raised you left you feeling scared and like you were always on the verge of getting abandoned, you might still find that you're operating in the world as if you'd better take what you can get and you hang on tight no matter what. Because to that traumatized nervous system inside you, it feels life and death. And so what a lot of people with childhood PTSD do is you feel attracted to somebody, and next thing you know, you've connected your whole life and all your hopes onto them, onto the relationship with them. And very quickly, everything becomes about trying to read them and make sure they're still into you. And as much as when I'm describing this sounds kind of crazy to expect so much so soon out of a relationship, if you have an attachment wound, that's what happens. It comes on very quick and strong. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So what's keeping you together isn't love, but a whole bunch of trauma dynamics that can turn you against the other person and them against you, because it makes leaving feel impossible. Now, my letter today is from a woman I'll call Hannah, and she writes, "Dear Crappy Childhood Fairy, about a year ago, I was dumped by a boy I'll call Richard. We met 4 years before while I was in a relationship with someone else, and there was an instant connection. At the time, I was loyal to that boyfriend, but I was dissatisfied with the lack of passion between him and I. And about a year later, I was single and almost homeless due to familial circumstances. I was 19 at the time. Richard lived as a roommate of one of my friends who kindly offered his place to stay until I got on my feet. Richard and I then quickly became friends and even more quickly became lovers. And within a month, we were in a committed relationship." Oh my gosh. "I relied heavily emotionally and financially on him as I tried to gain my footing working multiple jobs at once." I got my fairy pencil. I'm circling things to come back to. Okay, Hannah? And I'm going to read let's just get through your letter and see what's going on, and then I'll comment. All right. "It was amazing at first. He was thoughtful, kind, charming, funny, and a great presence. But about 2 months in, I noticed how critical he was of me, spanning from the company I kept to the music I liked to listen to. As someone who has struggled with anxiety and childhood trauma, it became hard for me to stay apathetic and confront the issue for fear of losing him." I think you mean hard to be neutral. Okay. "I began to lose myself trying to please him. By then, I began to fall into a deep, dark depression. When I tried to open up, it felt like he wasn't understanding me. He was dismissive, and little of what I tried to address ever changed. The relationship became mutually emotionally and physically abusive after about a year, and by a year and a half in, I could tell he no longer loved me. He was cold, unempathetic, and lacked any remorse or communication. Every time I tried to express that I felt like he was pulling away, he deferred and denied. It caused me a lot of pain, and I began to feel like I was going crazy. There were a lot of incidents, but on one particular night, I used alcohol to cope with it. A bottle of rosé in, we got into an argument, and I began to scream and cry, explaining that I'm crazy, I don't know how to stop, this isn't healthy. His friends saw it all take place, trying to comfort me as he stared at me with a blank expression, unable to sympathize. 2 years in, he dumped me by taking all my belongings at his house to my apartment while I was at work and changing the locks. It was debilitating, but I began to heal with time. About 8 months after the breakup, we reconnected after I had reached out. I heard rumors of him attempting to slander me to our mutual friends, and I wanted to find some closure. This began a period of 4 months of hot and cold game. One day, he'd say he missed me and still had feelings, and the next he would tell me to leave him alone and that I needed to chill out. I should have been over it so long after it had ended. After months of begging, bringing him gifts, and spending time trying to reconcile, I asked if he could stop trying to actively hurt me by telling me we were going nowhere and that I was a placeholder for someone better. After 2 days of silence, he allowed me to come over to discuss, and he said he did not see a future with me. I left as composed as I could, and it was one of the most painful experiences I ever had. Do you have any advice on how to move past this and how to understand what happened? I feel used, depressed, and lost." Okay. Hannah, yes, I think I can help you. Oh, what a hard thing to go through. I'm so sorry. I want you to find everything you need so that you never have to go through something this confusing and brutal again. Recovery is a path. You can't always get like perfect recovery the minute you decide to start trying. But this is what we can help you do. What I can help you do in this is to look at what happened and try to identify some of the points where you made decisions that were self-sabotaging. And that's where all your power is. You know, a lot of times when I read a letter where somebody has had this a terrible relationship experience, there will always be commenters who are like, but what about the guy? And it's like, the guy did not write to me. So I will do a little bit of speculation about him. But he didn't write to me. We're looking at you, Hannah, and how are you going to not have this experience again and get over this, right? Okay, so it's been about a year, and you say, I was dumped by a guy. You had met 4 years before while you were in a relationship with somebody else. There was an instant connection, and you were dissatisfied with the lack of passion with that partner. So, you know, this can be a CPTSD thing. You have a partner. I don't know if that partner was good or bad, but it didn't feel exciting to you. And so somebody where there's a lot of drama can feel so much more exciting. And I'm just going to guess that when you were a kid, you were exposed to a lot of drama. There was a lot of fighting and instability, maybe some alcoholism in your home. Like everything that you're saying kind of points to that. Maybe I'm wrong. Your letter didn't include that background. But this is what it looks like, is a strange attraction, an instant connection with somebody who has some matching trauma wounds where you could actually like stay together for a while, creating dopamine for each other, right? Okay. So you were 19 at the time, and you became single and almost homeless due to familial circumstances. You were 19 at the time. Okay. I would have thought the homelessness was significant, but when a person's 19, it's hard to have enough money for all the transitions. Okay. So Richard lived with this friend of yours, and you moved into that house and you lived there. So you started out as roommates in a house with Richard, and then you quickly got together, you were friends, and you quickly became lovers. Okay, yep, I get it. Within a month, you were in a committed relationship. All right, so I just want to say, because I know you're still young, that just because maybe you became monogamous, that's not the same as a committed relationship. A monogamous relationship means you don't see other people. And so that is a thing that people can do when they want to really see what a relationship has. But a month in, you are finding out what that person is. And if you live with that person, I've done that before, by the way, and it's wow, it's really, really hard to get your bearings because you're sort of obliged to act like you're cool with a little bit of distance, but you see them every day. And what are you going to do, right? You can't just like measure your dating and see them maybe once a week and then twice a week as you get to know them, which is much healthier, really, especially if you have CPTSD and dating just triggers all this stuff. You kind of need a cooling off period. You need to reason things out. You need to kind of see what their communication pattern is with you. And so you can't get space from somebody. So if somebody's getting overwhelmed, and either one of you is getting overwhelmed in the relationship or just feeling a little bit like, I need room, you can't get it. And the only way to get it is to pull away emotionally. So that I think that possibly that is what was happening. But, okay, so then you say it was amazing at first, and he was thoughtful, kind, charming, funny, great presence, but about 2 months in, I noticed how critical he was, spanning from the company you kept to the music you like to listen to. Okay, the telltale sign here is the 2-month time span, about 2 months, maybe 3, maybe even 1 sometimes. That's how long it takes for the sexual high to wear off. That's what it is. So, when there's that physical attraction and when you're getting into a sexual relationship with somebody and it's all very new and exciting, they seem great, and it takes about 2 months to start going, they're not really what I thought. So you were not what he thought. There's nothing wrong with the people you hang out with or the music you listen to, but it wasn't matched to who he is. So you guys had a physical attraction, but maybe not a compatibility. And right now, with your heart broken, that might hurt to hear, but I'm just going to level with you. You just sound like you weren't compatible. And because he rushed into the relationship too, which is interesting and points to trauma, he rushed in And he wasn't really ready to be in a serious relationship with somebody he hadn't gotten to know yet either. And there was some lack of alignment there. And so it became hard for you to stay neutral and confront the issue and the fear of losing him, which is what traumatized people do, right? You have a big trauma wound, you get together with somebody, especially if it's a sexual relationship, and then you're like, it doesn't matter if it's horrible. It's like your whole nervous system is just like, do whatever it takes so that they don't leave. Oh, and it's like being imprisoned in your own mind. It's horrible. It's really, really horrible. And so I just want to say, like, try to have perspective on that your attachment wound was running the show here. When your guy was being critical and he was being standoffish, you weren't able to do the logical thing, which was to back up, A, because you lived with him, and B, because you have a trauma wound that can't take it. There's just, that rejection just activates so much old stuff that, it kind of drives a girl to just go to any lengths to make the bad thing stop, to make it work. So it's really normal to feel like you're going crazy. It's really normal to feel like you're losing yourself. So you say a lot of stuff happened. And he was denying that he was pulling away. So that's interesting too, because I just take your word for it. He was, but he wouldn't admit it. So that's what I think. He didn't have any way to take space, as he was in a new relationship and he had no way to take space. Or he was just a great big manipulator, and he was a traumatized person, I suspect. So I don't know. People are complicated. So Hannah, this thing where you say that you were mutually emotionally and physically abusive, I'm a little confused about this because that's a really big deal. And I don't know if that continued in your relationship or how serious it was. But that's very grave. Like after about a year, you were physically abused. Yeah, what was going on here? And then you stayed together even longer, and you could tell he no longer loved you, and he was cold and lacked empathy, and he lacked remorse or communication. And every time you tried to express like he was pulling away, he deferred and denied. I'm going to continue to look at your story and try to understand what happened between the two of you, but this thing about the violence is kind of glaring at me like a very bad thing, very toxic, and a clear sign that it was time to get out of the relationship. So I will help you try to understand what happened despite all of that. But what I was going to say is this is a trauma bond relationship. You guys would have something that kept you together, and then these horrible fights and meltdowns. You were going crazy. Everything was so bad. And then you would try even harder to get him back. And so that's what trauma bonding does. And it's not your fault. It's what trauma does to people, is to prime them for that. But even people who were never traumatized can be vulnerable to that. It's a technique that's used to manipulate people when they're being tortured, is intermittent reinforcement. So you are really nice to them, then you're mean to them, then you're nice, and then you're mean. So what I'm hearing here is that the way that it was crazy was very mutual. So it's not like you were the victim. It's that you were sort of staying with somebody where you never felt like he was really into you. And things got very dramatic between you two. So let me just continue talking about this. At the risk of I don't want to ignore the violence that happened here and that you tried to keep going, but I will help you try to understand his character and what happened despite all of that. Okay, a lot of stuff happened, but on one particular night, you got drunk. It's interesting, you say, I used alcohol to cope with it. And I don't know. I know that some people feel like alcohol helps them cope with things. And it's like an escape or something. I just don't have that. Alcohol, if I'm feeling really bummed out and I drink alcohol, it makes me feel more bummed out. But a bottle in, you got into an argument and began to scream and cry, explaining, I'm crazy, I don't know how to stop, this isn't healthy. All right, so you had a lot of fear come up. You had a lot of fear coming up. And, I'm just going to say it right now. If you don't know this yet about me, Hannah, I do these techniques called the daily practice. And all those feelings, fear I'm crazy, fear I can't handle this, fear this is all too much, fear he's leaving, all of that goes on paper twice a day. and then you ask for it to be removed. If you're a spiritual type of person, or you release it, then you close your eyes in meditation and you rest your mind and you let your mind recompose itself. And you will be shocked how much this helps you process your emotions versus talking about it. Trying to tell somebody you're in love with how you feel when they're not really like caring for you is horrible, but you need to take it somewhere. And using the daily practice, you can work like with a buddy who also uses it. It would be a woman in this case for you. And you could read to her what you had written from time to time and just get a witness and just have her relate to you and go, yep, I've had that happen too. And so you had a total meltdown, and his friends saw it. They were trying to comfort you, and he had a blank expression. So what was that? I don't know. I don't know him, and I can't really get a clear picture of him, which is interesting. But his indifference to you, okay, I'm just going to tell you that like 3 areas it could be. Maybe he's a sociopath and he's not capable of caring about other people. All right, the other one is maybe he has CPTSD and he was dissociated from having a fight with you. That's kind of a likely candidate. Dissociation makes people have a blank expression, and it makes other people quite upset. Later, it'll often go from like a great big rage or hurtful things that they say and then nothing. And that's what people with CPTSD often do. And then he couldn't sympathize, but then another time he just was, you saw him being blank-faced. So the last possibility is, and I'm hearing only your side of the story, which is as it should be. That's what I do here. I take a person's letters, but is it possible that you were being so difficult? I just noticed that later he changed the locks, and some people, when you broke up, and some people do that kind of thing out of an abundance of caution. Some people do it to be nasty, but mostly why people do that is because they're afraid that you're going to come and invade the home and do stuff that like they can't have a boundary on. So I'm just asking you, Hannah, did you get so distressed by this that you became that difficult and that frightening for him? Because that's what people do when they're dealing with that. It's called gray rocking somebody. You just don't give them any energy because you're trying to reduce the chances that there's going to be a big scene. So that could have been going on. I'm not trying to defend him, but I'm trying to explain him and trying to stay open-minded about what's going on here, because a little bit it doesn't quite make sense. So 2 years in, he dumped you by taking the belongings to your house while you were at work and changing the locks. And you felt terrible and you began to heal. And then 8 months later, you reconnected because you had reached out. So, okay, I promised you I was going to tell you where you made some choices. So 1 was just moving in with somebody you were in love with. 2 was not moving. It sounds like you did move out and had your own apartment. So, okay, you did that. I don't know when you did that, but I think if roommates fall in love, one of them should move out for the relationship to continue with any chance of moving forward. Sometimes things are just more casual than that. I know, but that would be ideal. Okay. So you reached out to somebody who dumped you and changed the locks on you. And I would say that is you breaking a boundary that he had tried to set, and you breaking a boundary of sort of common sense of not chasing somebody who hurt you that bad. And you said that you heard rumors of him attempting to slander you to mutual friends, and you wanted to find some closure. Okay. So this is where I feel the kind of like rough energy in you. So when you have an ex and things have gotten crazy, you know what? They are going to talk to their friends about it. That's the fact. The best thing you can do beforehand is just try not to do things you feel terribly ashamed of. And when it's too late and we've already done it, you need to just work on yourself to become a better person than that. And if people can't forgive you for it, then they might not be your friends. In most cases, I would say that if you created drama that was uncomfortable or scary for people, you can apologize to those people. But with exes, I would say do not make contact. And especially someone who has gone so far as to take your stuff to your house, change the locks, and not be in touch with you. So I'm just going to call you on this. You making contact and saying you want closure is not. You may believe that you want closure, but there is no closure, sweetie. It's closed already. It's really like, I think most of the time when people say they want closure, it actually is code for the opposite of closure. They want to open things up again. You were having feelings. You had fear he was talking about you. You had fear what people thought. And then you got into 4 months of a hot and cold game with him. And it's not uncommon that people who have already decided that they're not into us will play cat and mouse for a while. because A, they don't want to hurt our feelings, and B, there was love there once, and it's kind of hard to resist sometimes somebody you were once with. So that happens, but you were seeking it out. So I don't think he did that to you. You sought it out, and I feel in my bones that you were really hoping you could pull him back into a relationship. So one day he'd say he missed you and still had feelings, and the next he would say leave him alone, and that I needed to chill out, and that I should have been over it so long after it ended. So it just sounds like there was a lot of drama. And so on a good day, there were certain feelings, but then things, terrible things would happen. And you're kind of surprised, like it was so inconsistent. But, with two traumatized people, things get inconsistent like that. People can get hopeful and think, we can be nostalgic. But actually then we come back to our senses and we go, no, this relationship was awful. And, so then you said after months of begging, bringing him gifts, and spending time trying to reconcile, okay, red flags on you here. Do not beg people, no matter what, for love. Do not beg for it. It's not a good thing, and it will kill whatever love is there. Bringing him gifts, that's, okay, this is their tough love, okay? You don't bring a guy gifts who's dumping you and who's not into you. It doesn't play well. It feels weird. It feels like somebody has very low self-esteem, and it feels a little bit manipulative to them. So it's not a good thing to do. And then spending time trying to get him to reconcile. Okay, so yeah, you were totally trying to get him to reconcile. So first you did that. Then you asked if he could stop trying to actively hurt you by telling you that you were going nowhere and that you were a placeholder for someone better. So I think what you're saying is that he said that. And what I'm hearing in that is, he was honest with you. He's going nowhere. He didn't see a future in you, he told you when you confronted him on it. He didn't see it. But perhaps if sex was on offer, I'm just going to say, if you are dating a man, or if you know a man and you're trying to get him to have sex, you might succeed, but that is not going to make him love you. It's just not. And in fact, if you're trying to do that in a context of a relationship that's fraught and you're getting a lot of rejection, it almost guarantees that he's not going to love you. And it's sad. And CPTSD puts you in this position where you can simultaneously handle somebody treating you without love and trying to get love. And there it is. It feels life and death. It feels like he's got all the love in the world and you must have it or you're going to die. But that's not true. That is your trauma talking. He doesn't have any love for you. There's love for you in this world, but not from him. And so I'm telling you that because you want to get over this. And so I'm just laying it on you here. You're holding on to an ideal here. You're in love with an idea of him, of an idea what might have been, which is like the worst thing that people can do, because what does work is being in love with the actual person and liking the current situation. And if you don't like the current situation, and trust me, you don't like this, the sane thing is to step back. Like, this isn't good. I don't feel treated well. So you're sort of this thing where you said you asked if he could stop trying to actively hurt you by telling you that you're going nowhere. But I just think, Hannah, maybe you put him in a position where he had to be straight with you because you were trying so hard with the gifts and everything to get him to reconcile. So he had to say it. And a lot of times people don't want to hurt our feelings. And so, they're trying to be polite and they will take the sex that's on offer. And then they'll be like, but again, let me be totally straight. I'm not into this. And this is what it sounds like to me. And this thing where he said that you were a placeholder for someone better, that's hurtful, but I think it's what you needed to hear because that's probably literally what you were. He knew you weren't the one for him. He would like to have somebody he was into, and he had this idea that he could fill up his time with you until that person came along, which is totally crappy, and no one should do that, although most of us have. But people often say, well, I'm just staying in this relationship till I meet someone better, and I say, don't do that. Because not only are you exploiting the person who's being used as the placeholder, but you're making your own kind of vibe just really complicated and dramatic, and good people aren't going to be attracted. So, if that's any consolation for you, he's handled it so badly, like good things are not like about to happen for him. It's going to take some time for him too. All right. So then after 2 days of silence, he let you come over to discuss, and he said he didn't see a future, and you left as composed as you could. Good girl. That's right. Composed as you can. And it was so painful. And yes, facing the truth is so painful, but so good. It's so good, you know? It's like finally we cry and face the horrible disappointment of how things actually are, but there's this beautiful integrity in being in the truth, isn't there? Like finally, it's like coming out into the sunshine from like mud, the mud of denial, the mud of begging and giving gifts and everything, and coming out and just going, okay, free and clear, free and alone, no longer feeling shame, no longer feeling need, and just feeling sad. Sad is good and clean and appropriate. So how to move past this is do not have contact with this guy, no matter what, just no contact. Don't look him up on social media. Don't ask people what's going on. If you have mutual friends, probably best to kind of stay away from those. Like you need to detox from the whole idea of this. You have a condition that's a little different than average people. So while some people stay friends with their exes, some of us are very different. And especially when there's this kind of trauma bond thing going on that you guys have. A trauma bond is when your attachment gets stronger as a consequence of things being painful. So people are nice and then they're mean and then they're nice and they're mean, and it'll ratchet up your attachment. And it's not just because we have trauma. We're vulnerable because of the past trauma, but you can do that to basically anybody. It's a psychological torture it's called intermittent reinforcement. And I don't think he was necessarily doing it to you on purpose. It's just what you guys had. And sometimes that's the thing about a relationship. You can keep thinking like, if I had been different, if he had just done this, but how it is how it is. And I remember my friend telling me, if you want to know what a relationship is like, take a trip. So you guys had a trip, you lived together, you had the whole thing, and now you know this is the chemistry of you and this guy. So that's how you move past. You cut off all contact. Then you wean yourself from thinking about him and talking about him. So this letter that you wrote me and us talking about him this much, let this be the closing of the chapter. There's really nothing else you need to know. You have your stuff and you get to get busy with your healing right now. So I know you feel used and depressed and lost, and it gets better, and it gets better when you can start being honest with yourself about what you want, and you can start setting boundaries, and you can start reserving your heart until you have clear signs, reliable signs, tested over time, that somebody really is good for you and is interested in you, and not just in the first 2 months. If you can delay sex, you can have so much more of a window to figure out what you really have with somebody. And then if it's not what you hoped, it's much easier to leave a relationship where sex has never happened. There isn't that bond kind of like making you feel like you have to stay, which is natural, but it's exaggerated in people with trauma and who have an attachment wound. So you have to take special care of yourself. I have a dating course that talks you exactly through all the steps of doing this, of how to set yourself up with absolute clarity about what you want and date very carefully. And if you want to check out that course, I have a link right here. You can click on it and go right there. And I will see you very soon.